You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 109, and this is part 3, the final episode of Side Hustle Week. Today we're talking with Chris Guillebeau.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What is going on, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community, and this is part 3 of Side Hustle Week. We are going to have an amazing conversation with Chris Guillebeau. Amongst many other things, some of the subjects we're going to touch on today are getting paid to travel, discontent, and how it's important to have a little bit of discontent in your life and your daily activities. You don't have to quit your job to earn an additional income. In fact, in many cases, it's not suggested. Chris shares not one, but 2 of his many kick-in-the-gut moments and talks a little bit about how he got to where he's at today. And of course, he's going to share a couple amazing side hustles that you might want to think about. And then, of course, you can get many more stories like that from Chris's podcast at Side Hustle School Podcast. Just look it up on any one of your podcast players or go to sidehustleschool.com. And if that's not enough for you, make sure you go back and listen to part 1 with Peter Alwood. Now, that wasn't really a side hustle conversation as much as it was a slow hustle, meaning anything that you do in life, Peter has the concept, and I as well, that you don't have to have this hustle, neglecting certain things in your life and just really kind of killing yourself to get to where you want to be. And I'm going to talk more about this at the end of this show, so definitely stick around because I'm really going to get into a conversation that I had online with a couple other folks in reference to really working your ass off 12 to 15 hour days for 5 years and kind of getting ahead. I don't subscribe to that idea, and I'm going to tell you why at the end of the show. And then during part 2 of Side Hustle Week, I reposted a conversation that I had with Nick Loper of Side Hustle Nation. And in that conversation, we really dug deep into some other side hustles, and we go even deeper if you go to sidehustlenation.com. He's got a laundry list of amazing side hustles that are already vetted, that other people are very successful at. They all already have proof of concept, so you don't have to worry about that. You'll be able to just go pick up where that's at, and you might even be able to contact those individuals that can help you along in getting that side hustle started in your area. All right, let me introduce you to Chris real quick. Chris Guillebeau is a New York Times best-selling author and a modern-day explorer. During a lifetime of self-employment that included a 4-year commitment as a volunteer executive in West Africa, he visited every country in the world before his 35th birthday. That's 193 countries in total. Since then, he has modeled the proven definition of an entrepreneur, someone who will work 24 hours a day for themselves to avoid working 1 hour a day for someone else. Chris's first book, The Art of Nonconformity, was translated into more than 20 languages. His second book, The $100 Startup, was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, selling more than 500,000 copies worldwide. His third book, The Happiness of Pursuit, was published in September 2014 and was also a New York Times bestseller. His fourth book, Born for This, will help you find the work you were meant to do. And now he's got a latest book out called Side Hustle, From Idea to Income in 27 Days. And something else to think about, every summer in Portland, Oregon, Chris hosts the World Domination Summit, a gathering of creative, remarkable people with thousands in attendance. Chris is also the founder of Pioneer Nation, Unconventional Guides, the Travel Hacking Cartel, and numerous other projects. Men of Abundance, it is my distinct honor to introduce you to Mr. Chris Guillebeau. Chris, welcome to Men of Abundance, man. How you doing?
Wally, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Man, it's my pleasure. It's been a long time coming. Ever since I first heard of you, and I honestly cannot remember if it was on, who knows, EO Fire, one of Pat Flynn's podcasts or something like that. I immediately went out and purchased your book. Well, actually, I bought the digital version of $100 Startup. And
That's awesome.
one of the things that really intrigued me about you was the travel, which we're going to get into, and all the other things that you've done while you were traveling and all that stuff. So I just love that part. Where are you at in the world today?
I'm actually at home. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm getting ready to go out. I'm going to Hong Kong and Indonesia this coming week. But at the moment, I'm just a little homebody in Oregon.
Homebody. That's funny coming from you, actually. Guys, you'll understand what I'm talking about here in just a minute. So, Chris, before we get too much into the show, I really like to start out with an attitude of gratitude, just like I do every single morning, and many of us do. So what do you have to be grateful for today?
Man, I got so much to be grateful for. I have a good life. So, big picture, I'm grateful to my community. They're just an amazing group of folks, podcast listeners, blog readers, book readers. They're awesome. In particular, maybe one specific moment, I just heard from someone today who, connected with my work in some fashion, and obviously she did all the work. It wasn't me, but through some combination of events, she was able to quit her job and go and do some traveling for about a year. And I just think that's awesome because my whole goal is to be a catalyst for that and just kind of inspire or support people along the way. And I know, like I said, that she does all the work, or anybody who does something like that, they do all the work, but I'm glad that I can support it in some way. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. You are definitely the catalyst for many people to get started on this whole side hustle bit. And I just talk to my guys all the time about the importance of having a side hustle. And that's literally on your website at chrisguillebeau.com. You need a side hustle. Why do you think that is?
It's really interesting because I just told that story about somebody who quit their job. But I think over the past couple of years, I've just become more aware of the fact that, a lot of people can't quit their jobs for whatever reason. A lot of people like their jobs, like they want to be part of a company or an organization, and that's great. But even so, I think, even if you don't want to quit your job, most people want more than one source of income. And that's what a side hustle is all about. I mean, that's what it brings you. It brings you not only the extra money, but also the security that comes from getting money outside of your paycheck, the possible backup plan, and just a creative process or the idea to do something different from what you do for your work. And so I see it as kind of like an all upside, no downside situation. I always encourage people to not take a lot of risk. Don't borrow money. Don't spend a lot of money. Just start something and see where it goes. And that's why I think there's nothing bad about it. Like there's only good things can come from starting a side hustle.
Yeah, for so many reasons. I'm one of those people that I have a great job. I love what I do. When I retired from the military, I'm actually back doing exactly what I was doing when I retired, and serving soldiers and doing what I do at a Army Medical Center. But I always have a side hustle. Yeah, thanks. I always have a side hustle. I've got 5 sources of income coming in right now. They're not huge on the other side, but it's allowing me to live on the beach in Hawaii. And
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's
I think
great.
that's great.
It is. It's absolutely wonderful. But on a harsher note, I think it's great to have a side hustle also because you never know what's going to happen either to your health, to the health of a family member, or even to your job. That's going to force you to either put more effort into your side hustle or go down to the unemployment office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's totally true. It's an imperative, maybe especially for younger people who are realizing this, like they went to school, they got into all this debt, and that now they're learning there's not like loyalty to a company, the way that it used to be, or at least the way that some people imagined that it was. But really for people of all ages, there's all sorts of good reasons, as you said, to be looking out for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, I talked a little bit before I got on the line here with Chris about what he's been doing, and, I've been listening to his podcast. I've got one of his books. I've got another one on the way. And I just dig everything this guy's doing professionally. But, Chris, here on Men of Abundance, we really like to get to know the man behind the abundance. So if you could, sure, get a little bit more personal with us. We know you're from Oregon, but share a little bit. Let's get a little bit personal and kind of work up to what you're doing now and how you got into that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like that approach because, people can always learn the biographical details. I think when I was thinking about like getting personal and all that, I was like, what's the motivation behind what I do? And, one part of it is curiosity. I think for better or worse, I've always been a curious person. I've always kind of I was that annoying person always asking why, why do we do things this way? And that's kind of carried me through, my career over the past 10 years as an author, like I've spent most of that time annoying my publisher, like, hey, why do we do this way? Can we do it this way? Can we change this up or whatever? So there's curiosity, but then also like a lot of it came from discontent as well, and just like not being satisfied either with myself or with some situation in life. And that can go all the way back to like high school years when I dropped out of high school and I was a juvenile delinquent. Then my early 20s kind of had this, moment that I need to be doing something more for others. Like I'm really kind of focused on myself, and like I want to be an entrepreneur. That's great, but how am I actually changing the world? And so I spent 4 years living overseas in West Africa. And then, after that, I had this travel quest to go to every country in the world, also inspired by curiosity and discontent. And, I did that for 11 years and ended it 3 years ago when I, achieved that goal finally. But even now, it's kind of like, I don't want to be satisfied. I don't want to be content with something. I feel like there's always room for improvement. There's always room to grow. And so the third thing is I'm motivated to grow, and I'm motivated by challenging myself.
Wow. Yeah, very impressive. And, that's a fine line between being satisfied and discontent. And I totally get that. I call it, in my world, I call it constantly improving your foxhole. It can never be good enough.
That's good, yeah. That's right. I think discontent can be a positive thing. Discontent is not necessarily something you always have to resolve. I think discontent, like if you're running a marathon, you're pretty discontented at mile 22, probably, unless you do it all the time. But you're going to keep going, right? Because you believe in the mission, you believe in the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's been a while since I read your $100 startup and really started kind of looking into what it is that you were doing, but you've traveled to every country in the world. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
That is amazing. And there was one country you had to go back to because I guess they had just created it.
Yeah, there was a couple. I had a few different things. Exactly, a few different things like that happened along the way, and that one in particular was South Sudan, which is the world's newest country. Newest being relative. I mean, like there's only a new country that the UN actually recognizes, every 10 to 15 years or so. But I started the goal was 192 countries. That was the number of UN member states. Now it is 193. And so I had been to Sudan, but then South Sudan gained its independence. And so, yes, I did go back and get that one.
That is simply amazing. I've been to 23 countries on 5 continents. And that's
great.
Thanks to my military service and some other travels that I've done on the side. But how did you end up on that road? Did you just one day decide I'm going to go to all these countries? How did that all start out?
Yeah, well, it was kind of like that, but I think it's important to note, it wasn't like I had been on country number 3 and then decided that. I had been traveling for a while, and I loved to travel. And then when I lived in West Africa, I was specifically living on a hospital ship that was docked mostly in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And I did a lot of travel in that region, West Africa. And from there, I kind of just got to really enjoy the process, the challenge, the discovery, the overcoming small obstacles, component of that. And so I was always very goal oriented also. So I was always the kind of person that was making lists and here's my to-do list for today, and here are the things that I want to accomplish this year, and here's how hopefully the things I do today are going to relate to the things I want to accomplish over the next year or whatever. So at a certain point, I was writing down a list of all the places I'd been. And I forget how many countries it was at that point, maybe 23, maybe about 30 or so. And then I set the goal of going to 100 countries. And I was like, yeah, I think I want this to be a long-term goal, go to 100 countries, sometime before I die. And so kept traveling. Then, I spent more time in Europe, spent more time in Asia, and got to maybe about 70 countries or so. And I kind of realized this is not a tremendously challenging goal, going to about half the countries in the world, because you can pick and choose. If you get stuck somewhere, if you can't get a visa somewhere, or if you just want to go to certain countries that are nice or whatever, you can just do that. And so that's when I kind of slowly began to get this idea, okay, what if I actually go to every country, no exceptions? And it took me a while to accept that. I thought of that idea and I sat on it for a while, and it just kind of kept coming back to me. And so finally it reached this point where it was I can either accept this and go for it, or I can reject it and kind of deny it. But if I do that, I'm sure I'll be fine. I can still have a good life, but I think there's part of me that will always regret it. And so it was that kind of moment that it was going to have to push forward, going to have to try, and we'll see what happens. But at least I'm going to make the attempt.
That was that discontent part coming in.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
exactly.
Along the way, you were blogging as well. And where was income coming in from? How were you making all that work?
Yeah, so the first half of the project was completely non-commercial. I started the blog, right around country 100, I think, or somewhere in there. Maybe it was between 70 and 100. It's been a while now, but the income component, like I had been an entrepreneur, for about 8 years at that point, like since I was 19. I'd always worked for myself. And when I say entrepreneur, that sounds kind of lofty. I wasn't like, starting a big business. I didn't have employees. I was kind of side hustling, essentially. Like I had a series of side hustles, and I had sold things on eBay, and I learned to do business consulting, and I learned to do affiliate marketing or SEO and building websites and all these kind of minor skills, which, don't amount to much, like kind of on their own, but together I was able to kind of craft this little career that allowed me to travel and allowed me to volunteer. And, I wasn't making a huge amount of money, but it's kind of like what you said, like, you have the ability to live in Hawaii on the beach. I had the ability to be debt-free and travel, and that was important to me. So I did that. And then eventually at a certain point, these careers kind of merged, and I started the blog, The Art of Nonconformity, and eventually wrote a book out of that. And I did start creating some products and services, but that was all very organic. That was it wasn't a strategic goal of like, I'm going to start this blog and make money. They kind of came up together as I went along.
Yeah, and you were kind of sharing some of your travel secrets along the way as well. That's what it's funny because as I think back when I was first really introduced to you, at the time I was talking a lot to people about just that. Many people were saying, I wished I could travel and make an income at the same time. And I was like, well, hell, I know you can, because I personally know people who are doing that. And then you came along, and that's exactly what you were doing. And then along the way, you were actually sharing your secrets on how to maximize your frequent flyer miles, what times to buy tickets, where to buy tickets, all this type of stuff. And I was super intrigued with that.
Yeah, well, you know what I think is interesting is like sharing the practical tips. Like that is what I do. The how-to is good, but I think to your first point, it's just as powerful to kind of show people examples and models of other people who've done that, in their own way. And so when somebody says, "Oh, I could never travel. I could never afford to go to whatever part of the world they want to go to," it's actually really good to be able to say, "Oh, actually, I think you can," or at least like look at these people, like they were able to do it. And if you don't like that person, or if you think that person had some advantage that you don't have, well, here's another person, and so you're kind of just showing people by way of example that those obstacles that maybe you perceived are just kind of perceived obstacles. And then of course you can learn how to do it, like you learn the practical and the logistics, but I think it's just as important to kind of counter that belief that this lifestyle or whatever it is not accessible to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into more of that here in just a minute, because we're going to talk about some of the stories that you share on your podcast every day, which is simply amazing every time I hear one of them. It blows my mind. One of my favorite things to do is to pay attention and listen to how people make an income and how people, little vocations, little side hustles on the side is so interesting. But before we do that, Chris, I would really like for you to share one of your kick in the gut moments. And this is kind of where so many people along the way, especially somebody who's traveled to every single country in the world, you've got to have at least one kick in the gut moment, but my intuition is you've got several. But share one of those with us and really make us feel that.
Yeah, okay, good. I mean, I feel like I live my life by a series of these kind of moments. Like I love your terminology for this kind of stuff. It's really smart. And I guess for me, I feel like if I'm not having these moments on a semi-regular basis, like then something's wrong. Like I'm kind of getting too ordinary. So kick in the gut moment, I'll do two, and one I already kind of alluded to, and that's like the moment of when I was in my early 20s and just trying to figure out what do I do with my life. And I was playing music, and I had like a little business that I ran on the side, and life was fine. But then like I kind of just kept feeling dissatisfied, discontented, maybe a little bit like mildly depressed. And I read the story of a surgeon from California who had moved to West Africa and had actually spent like 20 years, like the best part of his career, essentially working for free, like treating illnesses and conditions that were not otherwise treatable there. And I was like, man, this is inspiring. Like here I am just kind of like living the dream. Somebody who had like a lot more resources than I did kind of turned his back on all that and went to do something that was ultimately more meaningful. And so that's kind of what led me to say, well, I want to do that too in my own way. Like I'm not a surgeon and I'm probably not going to be able to do 20 years, but what can I do? And honestly, that was probably the best decision I ever made career-wise, even though it had no connection to like the career I have now. Like it really was the best thing because it opened my eyes to so many things and just giving me experience, giving me knowledge. being able to be in those places and kind of grow up, in some ways, in my early 20s. Like I'm so glad that I said yes to that. So people sometimes have talked about that in different like conversations about, oh, that was really, really good that you did that. Like you gave a lot. And I always feel a little bit uncomfortable with that because like I hope that I gave something, I hope that I contributed to something meaningful, but I also know that I benefited from it as well. So that's kind of a serious one. And not to say it's not serious, but to get on the side hustle thing, last year I was doing this book tour for my previous book, Born for This, and I did about 30 cities. Everywhere I went, I would give like a little stump speech for like half an hour. I talked about side hustle for maybe 2 minutes of that stump speech, and that book that has 13 side hustles. And I noticed that people respond to that more than anything else by far. And I had questions after the time, like half the questions are about side hustles. And it was funny because I even went to corporations and gave talks, and they're always really weird with me because they're like, please don't tell our employees to quit their jobs. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to say that, don't worry. So I would kind of like soften the whole like side hustle message, if I was speaking to a corporation. But nevertheless, like literally every single time afterwards, like all the questions, would always be about side hustles. And so I thought like, this is like, I don't know, divine inspiration or like the universe saying like, I really, really need to focus on this. Like this needs to be my thing because I'm doing like lots of things in different directions. And I like that. That's part of my nature. But I feel like I need to devote, at least a year, if not more, to really kind of, delving into this concept and supporting people in it. And so that's what led to the daily podcasts and the book that's coming out and all the other stuff.
Yeah, I completely get that from a personal perspective and where I'm going with this, because I've been thinking about later in the future when I start talking about this and where I've been and the audiences that I would talk about, because it's the abundance mindset that really sets people free to realize they truly can do whatever it is that they want to do as long as they get the right education, get the right coaches, mentors, and stuff like that, keeping it in perspective. And what audiences would, like corporations and whatnot, are going to want you to come in and say, hey, you don't need this job, but you do. Right. You do need the job, as as we talked about earlier. Not everybody wants to go on and be an entrepreneur. A lot of people want to do what they do in their job, but they also realize that they want a little bit more and they want to provide more value in their community and their marketplace. And let's face it, what's wrong with getting paid for that,
Yeah, that's great. And I think forward-looking companies, like there are good companies that kind of recognize that and are not threatened by it. And like what I always say is, if you're an employer, don't you want your employees to come to work because they're excited to be there and like they want to be there? They're making a choice to be there. Like obviously they need a paycheck, of course, but there's more to it, Like if your employees, suddenly didn't get a paycheck or they didn't need a paycheck, like their needs were provided for in some other way, but they still actually wanted to come. Like that to me is the ideal situation. So nobody needs to be threatened, by this concept. The only reason to be threatened is if you're not, serving your employees well. Like if you're providing a toxic environment and not supporting people in their dreams or not giving them good benefits or whatever, like that's when you should be afraid.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then, I think of certain vocations like teachers who are seasonal. Mm-hmm. Plus, they don't get paid very much. So it's nice to have that extra income to do what they do. Firefighters, they work like 48 hours on and 48 hours off. What are they doing that other 48 hours? I know a guy in Phoenix who installs pools on his time off. He has a little company. He does,
that's great.
Yeah, he's got a little thing going on. He's a real estate agent as well. He just recently sold a house, which is really cool.
Great.
So yeah,
he's got fire and water both going on. So his next thing will be like ice storm or something.
I didn't even think about that. That's hilarious. Yeah, I don't know about the ice storm in Phoenix though, but
that's true. I have a lot of folks in the community who are teachers, precisely for that reason. And it's perfect with the seasonality, and I think also teachers and firefighters, anybody who goes into those kind of careers, they have a certain skill set, and the skill set is not only like what they're actually doing in terms of like fighting the fire or teaching in the classroom, but there's usually like all these like supplemental skills that people acquire as part of that stuff. So teachers are good at like, communication and discipline and planning and all that kind of stuff, and firefighters are just kind of calm in the moment. They're able to like triage and think through, okay, well, what are the steps? Like I've got to do 6 things here. What is most important? So all these are like valuable skills in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. And I've found that personally the same thing. Teachers definitely do well in some sort of additional side hustle business, especially if it has something to do with teaching or some sort of instruction. Really cool. And then they just have the right mindset. When they're not stressed about income, how they're going to put food on the table at home, they can do their job so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Chris, we're at the point actually where we're going to share a few good news stories, and you share so many amazing stories on your podcast at Side Hustle School. I really dig it. But what I would like for you to do in sharing a couple of those good news stories is also share some of the stories of vocations or side hustles that you just found to be completely unique to the situation.
Yeah, okay. Great. We can do a lot with that too. I think as you mentioned on the show, I try to be pretty intentional about focusing on stuff that people haven't heard of or just sounds kind of, wacky or zany. Not for the purpose of being wacky or zany, but just showing people there's so many different ways that you can make money. And it's not only through, creating a website or becoming a coach or consultant. Like that stuff is fine, but there's so much you can do. So I don't know. Let's see. Good news stories. There's a guy in South Carolina who walked into an upscale men's store and he saw a candle for sale for $80. And he was like, $80 for a candle, that's pretty ridiculous. But then his second thought was like, how can I do that? Like, how can I learn to make, candles and sell them for a lot of money? Because apparently there's some market for it. So, he used this like tried and true method that our ancestors did. He went on YouTube and Googled, how to make candles, right? And it takes like a few months, but like he does this he just kind of figures it out and like creates a brand, does some really nice job with the packaging. And then while he's figuring that out, simultaneously he's figuring out how to sell on Amazon, which anybody can do. You can actually reach Amazon's 200 million customer base if you have a product of your own. Like they have a very easy program that you can kind of get in, and obviously it takes some work to optimize and actually reach people. But he figured that out. So within I think about 6 months, he's doing like $1,000 a month in income just from the Amazon, apart from something else. And his goal is to get that to like $5,000 to $10,000 a month. So like this is a side hustle, of course, but it's very substantial. Like and he didn't have like the candle making skill. Like this is what I always try to highlight. He was just curious, like I said in the beginning, and he was willing to kind of experiment, and he found that. So that's one thing. The story that I actually begin the Side Hustle book with, and I began the Side Hustle School podcast on January 1 with, is about this guy who blogs about fish tanks. And he created this blog of fish tank reviews because he was like a fish enthusiast, and lots of other people need to buy a fish tank. And so if you're going to do that, what do? Like you go online, you type in fish tank reviews. Now, this is a very, very uncompetitive niche. Like not a lot of people are thinking like I'm going to compete in the fish tank space. And so he had these links to an affiliate program, gets paid when people click through. He set this website up like 3 years ago, and he set it up in a weekend. There's not much to it. It looks really simple. And he's still earning to this day like $700 a month from that website, despite not spending any time on it at all. It's completely passive. And so I like that story because it shows like, well, if you can find the right topic, if you can do something with it that's a little bit creative, then maybe you can have this too. And he's not going to be able to live off that money, but it's like $700 a month that he does nothing for. It's fantastic. So that's those are the kind of stuff that I try to highlight on the show, and I see all those things as good news.
It is, absolutely. I mean, that's a car note plus, or
yeah, exactly.
A tuition fee, that's $700 changes somebody's life, possibly changes their zip code.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. He says he's been able to take 2 extra vacations a year with his wife, or stuff like that. So I always try to focus on as well, like what does that money allow you to do? Because just like you said, like there has to be a connection between like the money and the freedom or the opportunity or the option or whatever. And so it's really great when you can say like, oh yeah, I'm paying off my car, with the income that I made. I'm a teacher during the year, but this summer I set up this little project, and now throughout the rest of the year my car is paid off because of this thing I did in the summer. So that's nice. Yeah,
amazing. And man, there are many, many more stories like that at Side Hustle School. Just check out the podcast on whatever podcast player that you use. Go check it out. I'm going to have the link to all of everything that links to Chris in the show notes, so don't worry about writing any of that down. It'll all be there for you. So, Chris, we're at the point of the show where we're going to pay it forward. You ready to do that, brother?
I'm so ready.
Hey, guys, if I've been at all successful in convincing you that you need some sort of a side hustle, you're out looking right now for some way to build a side hustle or build upon an idea that you already have, and you're trying to learn things like building a website. What website should I use? What provider should I use? What kind of marketing should I do? Online marketing, social media marketing? Should I look at these new bots, these Facebook bots? How do I create an email list? autoresponder do I use? I mean, I can go on and on with all of the different intricate parts of starting a business, whether it's online, offline, brick and mortar, out of your home, whatever it is, you name it, you don't have to look any further. You can get it all in one place in a membership site called Freedom, Freedym. And I'm a member of Freedom. I'm always in there. I'm always learning new things. They're consistently adding new video tutorials, which is the way that I like to learn. I like to watch the video, pause it, then go implement it, then start it again and continue on from there. And you can go back all the time, anytime that you want, and watch these videos. Freedom is dubbed the Netflix for entrepreneurs because there are so many videos in there from all kinds of different people, not the same person. That's the cool thing about it. Yes, Ryan Lee is the creator of Freedom, and you'll hear him a lot. But he also brings on other experts that are experts in their fields, people that he learns from, and he shares that information with all the members within Freedom. Now, you can get access to Freedom by going to menofabundance.com, click on the resources tab, and scroll down and you'll see the Freedom logo. Now, if you are looking to get started with Freedom, I am asking you to use that link because it is linked back to me. Because since becoming a member and absolutely loving everything in there, I became an advocate, and then I found out I could become an affiliate. What that means is, for everybody that signs up from that link, Men of Abundance gets a kickback. And I say Men of Abundance because that's going back into keeping the mic on, and as I start generating more income through Men of Abundance, a portion of the income is going to various charities that I'm aligned with. So not only are you going to get the best training that you're going to find online to start any type of online business or brick and mortar business, you're also going to be helping me keep the mic on and helping a charity. How awesome is that? Paying it forward multiplied. Now go take a look at what Freedom can do for you at menofabundance.com/resources, or just click on the resources tab at menofabundance.com. Now let's get back to the conversation. Awesome. So share with Men of Abundance 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today.
Okay. 1 to 3 actionable steps. Let's focus on some of what we had in this conversation. I would say, first of all, ask why. Be that person like throughout the day, and you don't have to be annoying to other people, just for yourself. Like, why am I doing this? Okay, why am I going to work at this time? Why am I working on this project? Doesn't mean you have to stop all that stuff, but you just kind of understand, like, what is the motivation. I think just by asking yourself that may kind of lead you to some next steps. Then maybe one more question at the end of the day. Ask yourself, did today matter? And, when you ask yourself that question, I think everybody's going to know the answer, like on their own individual analysis. And, if you look back and you're like, yeah, today mattered, then that's great. You want to have more days like that. If you actually look back and say, you know what, the day wasn't terrible or anything, but I'm not really sure what I got accomplished, or I spent some time in meetings, or I did a bunch of emails, then you kind of see what you can do to change that behavior going forward, so that every day you are like, yes, today was purposeful. Even if nothing amazing happened, like I still made progress toward my goals. And number 3, I would say we touched on very briefly about discontent. I would say that discontent is your friend, and discontent is not something you have to run from. Discontent is something to embrace, because it can lead you to all kinds of, not just fun things, but like very meaningful life changes and stuff that might even seem difficult or challenging, but in the end it's going to be good for you. So embrace that discontent.
Wonderful. I dig it. What daily habits make up the biggest impact in your life, Chris?
I try to be focused on outcomes. I try to be focused on, part of the reason why I have the podcast every day is it's like I like the daily accountability. And the accountability is mostly to myself. Like I said, I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it. So that's my habit. I try to take advantage of small pockets of time. I try to, it's not like I always want to be working, but I never want to be in a situation where, like this phrase about like killing time people use. I hate that phrase. It's just like, I've got an hour to, before I do this, let me just kind of kill. I just hate that. Like, there's got to be something you can do with that hour. And if you intentionally make the choice to watch TV or whatever it is, that's great. Like, that's fine. But I just don't want to do things like that by default. Like, I want my default to always be like, I'm going to be writing something. I'm going to be like catching up with a friend. I'm going to be like making progress towards some other goal.
Absolutely. You should never be killing time. What you should be doing while you're on some downtime is either listening to Men of Abundance or listening to Side Hustle School.
That's right. That's right. Be sure you download the whole archives of both of those.
Absolutely. And on that note, I do want to mention that, guys, if you have not listened to Side Hustle School, what I dig about it is Chris narrates the whole thing. It's not an interview type of show. He sits and shares the story of the side hustles, and it's really cool the way that he does it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. What are you reading or listening to right now that you would recommend to our abundant leaders, and why?
Yeah, it's great. Let's see. Right now I am reading a biography of David Letterman, and I think it's just called Letterman. It's like the King of Late Night or the Last King of something like that. And actually, you might know Andrew Warner from Mixergy.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He also has a great podcast. He actually recommended that to me last week, and so I started reading it. And it's really fascinating. It goes into like this psychology of like, why David Letterman was who he was, and he became really competitive, and he did win at a lot of things, but he was also kind of depressed. And so it's just interesting to do that. So interesting to kind of like understand what motivates somebody who's been very successful and what you can learn from their successes and from their mistakes. I'm
interested. I'm going to have to look that up because my wife actually attended one of his shows. Actually, the one that Robin Williams was on shortly before his untimely death. And she had some interesting things to share about her experience in the audience. So that may be for another conversation. But it talks about what you were just talking about with his personality.
Right.
So, Chris, what do you feel holds most people back from living a true life of abundance?
I can only speak for myself on that. I think for me, what has held me back before, and maybe in some ways still holds me back, is maybe just like some kind of fear or insecurity or like unwillingness to let go, unwillingness to like truly like release the safety harness and like, okay, I've come this far, but like the real destination is further ahead. So I can't put that on anybody else, but for me, I think that's been the thing.
Wonderful. So what does living a life of abundance mean to you?
Gratitude, just where you started in the beginning, like realizing like, collectively as a society, like anybody listening to this, like we're living in a pretty amazing time and have access to resources and community and connection that nobody's ever had before. And also if you're listening to this, you're probably in a pretty privileged part of the world, and that's great. And so then that's collectively, and then me personally, I just feel like I can't believe I get to do this every day. Like I cannot believe like I get to write and podcast and go on book tour, and it's just amazing. Like the other thing that frustrates me is like authors who complain about book tour. They're like, oh, it's just so hard, and I'm like, it's not hard, it's amazing. Like every night I get to go and meet people who read the books. Like it's just awesome, So I'm grateful for all that.
Anybody who complains about the life that they created is just
exactly
wrong.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense at all. Right?
Exactly, but a lot of people do, right?
Yeah,
that's what's
they
so
do.
funny is a lot of people do.
I know. I hear it too. It drives me nuts. But and I'll let them go do their thing. So, Chris, we're going to close this up, brother. I truly appreciate your time. What did we not talk about today that you'd like to ensure that our abundant leaders get from our conversation?
Man, you asked pretty smart questions. So this was good. I don't have anything to add, and I hope I contributed something of value to everybody who's taken the time to listen to this, and I wish you much success in all your abundance.
Well, you certainly provided a lot of value to me personally, and I'm going to guess strongly that you did for everybody else listening as well. So, again, I appreciate you, man, and have a good time in your upcoming travels in the next couple weeks. I look forward to catching you on the interwebs and Twitter and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again. Aloha. All right, guys, that pretty much wraps up Side Hustle Week. I don't want it to stop there for you. I want you guys to take action. Get into this information. Go back and listen to it a couple more times. Get in onto those websites and those resources that I talked about throughout the show. Get into freedom.com. Go to the link in the show notes to make sure that you get access. And by using that link, as I mentioned before, you're going to be helping out Men of Abundance as well. But here's something that I want to talk about that I referenced earlier in this episode, and that is the slow hustle. Now, I was talking online. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different entrepreneurs, people of all different types of vocations, many different income levels, and there's a thought process out there that you have to hustle. And there was a comment in one of the groups where one of the guys said, I'm convinced that if you work 12 to 15 hours a day for 5 years, you will be financially free. And while that may be true, what will also be true and proven in history and proven in many, many other situations like this, is you will also be divorced if you're married, you will have no relationship with your kids, and your health will be greatly affected by working like that for 5 years. I know people that have worked like that for 5 to 20 years and are not financially free. It's more about what work you're doing, how much time off you're getting, where you're putting your energy. Are you putting your energy into your work? Are you constantly putting your energy into income producing activities, which is cool, but you have to have that counterbalance. You can't constantly be trying to make an income and improve your business and improve your income and neglecting your family. You got to decide what's important to you. And if your family is at all important to you, then you do not want to work 12 to 15-hour days for a year, let alone 5 years. That'll kill you. That'll kill your relationships. It's just not healthy. Anyway, that's not the way I want to run my life, as you all know. I'm more into the slow hustle idea. Yeah, this is a slow process. I'm slowly building Men of Abundance. I've quickly built other businesses and started making money right away. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to neglect other parts of your life, and it's going to bite you in the butt, and it's not going to be fun. So just decide what it is that you want to do, find a way to get it done, and do not try to do it on your own. Find a mentor, find a coach, find somebody who is where you want to be or on their way to where you want to be, and either hire them, befriend them, figure out something to do for them so that they can share with you some of those failure points that you may be able to avoid. You're not going to be able to avoid all failure, but you're going to be able to avoid the ones that they failed at. Okay? And like I said, reach out to the people that are doing what you want to do. Believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, people that are successful want to help other people be successful. Just reach out to them. Figure out a way to provide value to them, and they will provide value back. Now, go out and live your life of abundance, and make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.